After Tilly left, Roland sat still at his desk, lost in thought about her last words. Nightingale appeared, noticing Roland's prolonged silence. What did Tilly mean? Roland suddenly inquired. Nightingale shrugged. Perhaps Tilly sees Roland more as an ally than family? Roland didn't venture into uncharted speculations. Having spent half a winter with her, he had come to deeply understand the nature of this princess. Could it be that she wishes the real fourth prince doesn't return? Or did Roland's efforts to bond backfire? Nightingale remarked nonchalantly, saying Roland wasn't her real brother anyway. She could tell Roland was lying even without using her ability. Feeling a tad embarrassed, Roland touched his nose. Nightingale then asked, since Tilly isn't his real sister, is it okay to give her the textbooks? Roland looked at Nightingale, telling her that this winter, she could have copied the entire book. Roland was sure Tilly was already familiar with its contents. Yet, she formally requested, which speaks volumes about her intentions. He paused for a moment, then continued, moreover, the Slumbering Isle is primarily composed of witches. Even if all of them evolve, their strength still derives from the witches. But Roland is different. This knowledge can empower not only the witches but also the citizens. Roland relies on the strength of all the people. Facing the howling north wind and drifting snow, Lucia walked into the backyard of the northern slope. She closed the wooden door behind her. Anna, who was standing in front of a workbench, turned her head, signaling Lucia to come and warm up by her side. Lucia jogged over, and soon she was enveloped in a warm green fire, feeling as if she was submerged in a castle's bathtub, a comforting warmth spreading from her head to toes. Looking at the workbench, Lucia noticed Anna crafting parts for a new firearm. Anna curiously asked, how has her ability evolved? Followed by a smile, Anna bet no one in the Witches' Union has caused as much of a stir as Lucia when they evolve their ability. Flushing, Lucia touched her head modestly. She said if it weren't for everyone back then, she might not have made it to the end. Anna reassured her, advising her not to dwell on it, and then asked Lucia to demonstrate her new power. Lucia nodded, beginning to harness the magical power within her. The peculiar sensation she felt that night resurfaced. The outlines of objects around her no longer seemed familiar and continuous, but rather fragmented into tiny blocks. However, this time she didn't feel the painful backlash of magic, allowing her to calmly observe each block in detail. After describing her vision and thoughts to Anna, Anna pondered for a moment before saying, this might be a kind of branching ability. Agatha once mentioned that only a few possess it. It seems it only appears on one's coming of age day, and if missed, can never be acquired again. Anna believed it to be closely linked, perhaps a complement or enhancement, to a witch's primary ability. For instance, Soroya's magical pen requires no ink, as she would otherwise need to mix pigments before drawing. The same goes for the magical books of scroll. Perhaps Lucia's main ability involves decomposition and reconstitution. Anna speculated that these colored blocks might guide Lucia in precisely isolating specific elements. Anna then asked Lucia if she could try separating a single color block. Lucia nodded and focused her ability on an iron ingot by the workbench. Unlike her previous disintegration, this time she carefully channeled her magic into thin strands, pulling at the small blocks. The blocks began to loosen and were drawn out of the ingot, causing the remaining colors to shift and change. Subsequently, the entire ingot collapsed, curling into a yellow-green crystal the size of a fingernail. Beside it lay the remaining block of iron. Anna picked up the tiny crystals. This might be a compound formed from the other elements in the iron. She prepared to conduct a small experiment to verify her theory. Anna speculated if Lucia can extract a specific element from a whole object, and the remaining elements don't just disintegrate but instead recombine according to the conditions after losing that element, then any obsolete or inferior material can be reborn as valuable materials in Lucia's hands. Floating on the sea was a ship. The captain asked a blonde man why he wanted to visit the Western Territories. Telling him things aren't like before. The captain advised the blonde merchant that he won't find any jewels and furs anymore. The merchant feigned curiosity. Why is that? Don't they make a living off of that? Have the people of the Western Territories turned to banditry now? The captain looked away. Ever since the fourth prince took over the border town, the Western Territories have become peculiar. No one really knows what he's up to in his territory. But traders and merchants have a wonderful time, whether it's grains, fabrics, or general goods, everything gets sold out in the border town. Otto put on a conflicted expression, saying he hoped he wouldn't return empty-handed. In reality, he didn't care whether he'd leave with nothing. His sole purpose for this trip was to meet the lord of the border town. Due to Roland Wimbledon's title as a rebel king, he couldn't approach openly as an envoy. So, he disguised himself as a merchant and headed for the border town. What puzzled Otto the most was how Roland had managed to solidify his power in the Western Territories and pose a significant threat to the new king. This was starkly different from Roland's previously known character. The fight for the throne grew fiercer by the day. The eldest prince, Gerald, and the third princess, Garcia, had died one after the other. The fifth princess, Tilly, remains missing. Cities in the south and east had been destroyed during the relentless war, while only the Western Territories remained untouched. Only by arriving at border town could Otto ascertain the reasons for this. Upon reaching the dock, Otto took a deep breath of fresh air and stepped out of his cabin. The moment he set foot on the port, he was taken aback by the scene before him. He couldn't believe that a border town could possess such a dock. Even the dock of Greycastle's royal capital wasn't half as big. But what surprised him even more were the ships docked beside the pier. A line of unprecedented wide-bodied gray stone ships stood in front of him. Otto got on the carriage. As they passed the first checkpoint, Otto couldn't believe that no one asked them for any tariffs. The captain chuckled, informing him that those were the border town's police, not bandits or mountain robbers. Witnessing the smooth, hard roads beneath his feet, rows of neat houses, and the bustling residence, Otto, a noble, had seen grand architecture in his time. However, in his kingdom outside of the inner city, dilapidated houses, muddy paths, and sewage were common sights. Yet here, he couldn't find a single house that looked old or worn. As the captain and his crew left to unload their cargo, Otto decided to explore on his own. He saw goods he had never seen before. Then, a commotion arose in the crowd. Turning his head, he saw two women walking past him. Upon seeing the blonde woman, Otto felt his blood boil with recognition. His hands trembled slightly, and he rubbed his eyes to ensure he wasn't mistaken. He shouted the name Andrea. Ashes and Andrea turned to look, and upon spotting him, recognition flashed in Andrea's eyes. In a nearby tavern, they settled down at a table. Even now, Otto's heart raced uncontrollably. His eyes were fixed intently on Andrea, fearing she might suddenly vanish. Otto spoke up, saying that he, Belinda, and Oro had thought Andrea was dead. They never imagined they'd see her again. Ash, sitting next to them, teased, is he an old friend of Andrea? Why'd Andrea rush into the tavern the moment she saw him? Andrea shot her a glare. Ash laughed and said, she came here to protect her. After all, it was Andrea who dragged Ashes here to buy gifts for Tilly's birthday, and now Andrea trying to chase Ashes away. So much for being noble like Ashes said. Andrea retorted she doesn't need to act noble around Ashes. Otto, feeling left out of the conversation, felt a bit awkward. He turned to Ashes and hesitantly asked if she was a friend of Andrea. Before Andrea could respond, Ashes introduced herself to Otto and then asked, how did Otto know Andrea? Upon hearing Ash's question, Otto was visibly surprised. The frankness of her words lacked the manners commonly associated with the nobility. It puzzled him as to why Andrea would be in her company. Nevertheless, he chose to introduce himself sincerely. He's Otto from the Kingdom of Dawn. He's known Andrea since they were children. They grew up side by side alongside Otto's younger sister and Oro. Ashes, not missing a beat, asked why had he mentioned Andrea was dead. Before Otto could respond, Andrea interjected, not wanting to dive into that painful memory, simply stating that the eldest daughter of the Quinn family whom everyone knew is dead. However, Otto felt compelled to clarify. He needed to understand what had happened. In the Kingdom of Dawn, aside from the royal family, the most distinguished noble families were the Tokate, Quinn, and Loxi. The patriarchs of these families were not just close confidants of the king but also influential ministers. This age-old tradition was still very much alive in their generation. Andrea, being the firstborn of the Quinn family, was flawless, both in appearance and lineage. She had countless admirers, Otto and Oro was among them. Yet, tragedy struck during a spring excursion. Andrea's carriage had veered off its path and tumbled into the mountains. The calamity was so severe that even the king was alerted. The three noble families, collaborating with the royal family, mounted an extensive search. At the base of the mountains, they discovered her mangled remains. Everyone was in sorrow for a long time. In his own mind, Otto had harbored feelings for Andrea but hadn't had the chance to reveal them. He believed that he'd never get another opportunity. Yet, in this unfamiliar territory, fate had reunited them. After a pause, Andrea sighed softly, revealing that the carriage accident 5 years ago wasn't an accident at all. It was orchestrated by the Quinn family when her father discovered she was a witch. Otto froze at the revelation of witch. Andrea, paying no mind to Ash's reactions beside her, continued. When her father learned of her identity, he immediately arranged the accident. The people on that carriage weren't her, but the groom and her maid lost their lives because of it. Subsequently, she was exiled from the Kingdom of Dawn by her father and sent to a small town up north in Grey Castle. Otto remained silent for a moment, processing the information. In his mind, fabricating the accident might have been an attempt to protect Andrea. After hesitating for a brief moment, he voiced his thoughts only to be interrupted by Andrea's cold laughter. Andrea retorted, so what if people found out she was a witch? Had her father refused to hand her over, what could the church possibly do to him? Her hands clenched into fists. Would the church dare to storm into the kingdom and into her home with the Judgment Army to arrest Andrea? Her father was the chief minister, and he controlled the city's patrol squad. She remembered Miss Nanawa's father was merely a baron, but he stormed the Lord's castle, confronting Lord Roland face to face for the sake of his daughter. Yet Andrea's own father exiled her from their home. She doesn't see that as protection. For a moment, Otto was left speechless. Andrea stood up, telling Otto she was glad to see an old friend once more, but she hoped he would forget everything that she said today. Because the daughter of the Quinn family had died 5 years ago. As Andrea was about to leave, Otto finally spoke, telling her that Oro visited her grave every year, unable to forget Andrea. As she reached the door, she whispered softly, one day, he will forget. Watching the two disappear outside, Otto sat back onto the chair. He despised his own weakness. Even now, he brought up Oro instead of confessing his true feelings. He too couldn't forget Andrea. In Roland's office. Roland learned from Anna that Tilly was approaching her 20th birthday. While Anna was considering what gift to present to Tilly, it was only now that Roland remembered Tilly's birthday. The original fourth prince, he hadn't cared about Tilly. Previously, when Wimbledon III was still alive, grand birthday celebrations were held annually for Tilly, a privilege that even the highly favored Timothy had never enjoyed. Roland recalled that during Tilly's coming-of-age ceremony, the 4 great border generals had returned, and she had even received congratulatory gifts from the other 3 major kingdoms. Timothy and Garcia were somewhat jealous at the time. The two of them approached the fourth prince, trying to instigate him to do something horrible. However, ever since Tilly had sternly taught the fourth prince a lesson 8 years ago, Roland, the fourth prince back then, had been too cowardly to participate. He wasn't sure about Timothy's actions at the time, but the end result was the poisoning and death of a bear cub, a gift from the Wolfheart Kingdom. It had been Tilly's favorite present. Regardless, it must have been a terrible memory for Tilly. Having reflected on the past, Roland's thoughts shifted, and he quickly came up with an idea for a gift. He spread out a sheet of paper and began to sketch his gift. Anna noticed the outline of a bear. Roland smiled, explaining that as Tilly's brother, he wanted to craft a unique gift himself. When the time came, he would need Anna's technical expertise. On Tilly's birthday, Roland arrived at her room with a gift box in hand. After knocking on the door, he found her alone. Seeing that it was Roland, Tilly looked a little surprised. Roland mentioned that it was her birthday today and that he would host a grand dinner in the evening. But before that, he wanted to give her a gift. Tilly seemed a little taken aback as Roland placed the gift on the floor of the living room. It was a large pink box. Tilly noted that Roland had never given her a gift before. Roland corrected her, mentioning the quill he gave her when she was born. Tilly chuckled, reminding him that it was a Grey Castle royal tradition. She then asked if she could open the box, to which Roland eagerly agreed. As Roland watched with a smile, Tilly slowly untied the ribbon. When the box was opened, she blinked in surprise, asking, "What is this?" Roland explained it was a bear. Tilly curiously circled the plush toy, then couldn't resist hugging it. She remarked how different it looked from any bear she knew, but it was very soft. Roland had designed it after the pandas from his memories of another world. Known in that world as creatures that thrived primarily on their cuteness, Tilly commented on its strange colors, seemingly at a loss for words, but her sparkling eyes revealed her delight. Roland told her it's called a panda. Tilly quickly realized it was a creature from the world in Roland's mind. Roland nodded and prompted her to pull something on the panda's neck. When Tilly did, the toy suddenly moved, startling her and causing her to fall back. Roland quickly picked up the toy, explaining he had implanted some machinery in the panda that allowed it to perform various actions. As the panda moved step by step towards Tilly, Roland expressed his hope that she would like the gift. Tilly didn't respond immediately but tightly hugged the panda, asking him why he chose this particular gift. Roland asked if she remembered what had happened during her coming-of-age ceremony. Tilly looked at him, questioning if he was behind it. Roland recounted the past events. Although Timothy and Garcia were to blame, he felt he shared in the blame. If he had informed his father, none of it would have happened. Tilly knew that if Roland had spoken up back then, Timothy and Garcia would have beaten him severely. She decided to change the topic and asked about the other intriguing things from Roland's memories. Seeing Tilly's cheerful demeanor, Roland couldn't help but smile and promised that if given a chance, he would share more about his memories and the wonders of the other world. Just as their conversation deepened, they were interrupted by Andrea's voice from outside the room, closely followed by Ash's voice. Roland chuckled and rose from his seat. He looked at Tilly and said, "Many unpleasant things happened in the past. They are behind them now. Whether it's between him and Tilly or Border Town and Slumbering Isle, if there's ever any trouble, she can always come to him. He will always be her brother." He paused for a moment and said, "Happy birthday, Tilly." As he opened the door, the two witches outside stared at each other in surprise. The prince grinned and said, "There's no need to compete. I was the first to give a gift." Otto walked despondently through the streets, the words of Andrea still echoing in his ears. He made his way to a stone bench in a corner, brushing off the accumulated snow before sitting down. Although he couldn't forget Andrea, he still remembered the purpose of his visit. Apart from the military camp, he had explored every corner of the town, gaining a comprehensive understanding of the place. According to the townsfolk, this was once an impoverished land, and all the changes were due to Roland. He not only led the people to fend off the terrifying demonic beasts but also invented various amazing machines and tools to improve their lives. Otto documented everything he saw, including those machines. As he spread out his notebook to document the day's findings, 2 figures appeared before him. It was what the townfolks called policemen. They called out the fake name he used when posing as a merchant. When Otto inquired about their purpose, the policeman's reply caught him by surprise. They had received a report of suspecting Otto of a spy and asked him to come with them, instructing him to put his hands behind his back and not to resist. Seeing the 2 policemen trying to arrest him, Otto dodged and continuously argued that he was innocent and claimed to be a nobleman from the Kingdom of Dawn. He managed to break free from their grasp but was suddenly punched hard in the stomach. Just a few days ago, he had claimed to be a merchant, and now he was a noble? The policeman sneered. After struggling briefly, the two policemen overpowered him, suggesting that if he confessed, there might be a way out. After a day in jail, Otto was met by Carter. He quickly identified himself, stating that he was on a mission from the king of the Kingdom of Dawn. He soon presented his identity seal and claimed that he was seeking an alliance with Grey Castle against the church. He demanded to meet with Prince Roland Wimbledon. Looking over the records Otto kept, Roland shook his head. Recording so much is bound to raise suspicions. He told Otto that he shouldn't take to heart about the rough arrest. There had been malicious individuals in the past who had resisted arrest while pulling out daggers to injure two officers in the process. Otto added that such a policy might wrongly accuse innocent outsiders since not everyone carries documents to prove their identity. Roland looked toward Nightingale in the mist and reassured Otto, saying they had various measures to ensure the innocence of the wrongfully accused. Prince Roland spread his hands and remarked, perhaps in this endless winter, Timothy is growing restless. After all, every month he seems to send some people to stir up trouble. Roland made no effort to hide his hostility towards the new king. Otto realized that the differences between the two sides had become irreconcilable. He earnestly asked Roland if the popular rumors were true. Was Roland genuinely planning to overthrow Timothy? Roland responded bluntly, stating Timothy should never have been anywhere near the throne. In his pursuit of power, he had murdered their father, framed the eldest brother, and driven their sister out of Grey Castle. The entire southern territory was ravaged by war, with its people displaced, all because of Timothy's misdeeds. Only by throwing him off the throne could Grey Castle regain its past prosperity. Otto was taken aback. Timothy lacked the character that Roland displayed, and their auras were distinctly different. Otto slowly stood up and gave a formal bow. As a friendly neighboring nation, the Kingdom of Dawn hoped for Grey Castle's swift stabilization. He was here to bring the treaty from the King of Dawn. Roland, intrigued, asked where it was. Otto explained that to avoid any leaks, he hadn't brought the written treaty. However, the King of Dawn had granted him the authority to formalize the agreement. He reiterated the terms of the defensive and offensive alliance given by the King of Dawn. Such an alliance would effectively counter the Church's advances, avoiding the fate suffered by Eternal Winter and Wolfheart. Roland's response took Otto aback. That's it? What did Roland mean that's it? Otto felt he had been very clear. He assumed Roland hadn't understood and wanted to explain again, but Roland interjected while saying this plan will not work. The Church's determination to conquer the four great kingdoms is much stronger than Otto or the King of Dawn have imagined. Clearly, they are unaware of the Church's secrets. Roland would provide the Kingdom of Dawn and Otto with the intelligence he had, hoping Otto would relay the information to their king. Otto glanced at the documents in his hands, transcendent warriors, pure ones, demons. These terms caused cold sweat to drench his clothes, realizing that the Church's purpose to annihilate the four kingdoms was to prepare for an impending doomsday battle. This information was utterly mind-boggling. Stammering, Otto said he couldn't make the decision alone, he must report immediately to their king. Prince Roland calmly responded, the matter concerns the life and death of both of their nations. Caution is necessary, but they don't have much time. Andrea stood atop the castle, gazing southward towards the direction of the flowing crimson water river. Seeing the howling cold wind, Shavy asked Andrea if she wanted to say goodbye in person. Andrea shook her head, saying it was the same whether she did it here or there. Reflecting on what Prince Roland had told her, Otto had mentioned Andrea before leaving, earnestly requesting Roland to take good care of her. Watching Shavy curled up from the cold, Andrea told her to head back inside. Shavy shook her head, mentioning that if she caught a cold, she could take a couple of days off to play cards after Lily treated her. This seemed reasonable, and Andrea gave her a thumbs up, then looked towards the dock again. The ship began to sail, and Andrea thought the time would heal all wounds. Forgetting might be the best outcome for everyone. She was well aware of Otto's feelings. But as members of the most prominent noble families, they should marry more suitable ladies, not waste time on a witch. Staying away was the best choice. Such a relationship would surely be fruitless, and she didn't want to return to the land that had forsaken her. Goodbye, my friend, thought Andrea. Roland entered the workshop and pushed open the wooden door. Anna and Lucia immediately noticed him. Anna quickly warmed up Roland, who nodded with a smile. He then approached Anna and asked what she was working on. She pointed seriously at the steel barrels on the table, mentioning she was manufacturing new gun barrels and locking mechanisms based on Roland's blueprints. Anna suggested some improvements, and Roland, unable to resist, tried to pat her head, but she playfully swayed away. Roland didn't mind her questioning his designs. After all, the firearm blueprints were inferred by him based on his memories, and there might be room for error and improvement. Especially considering Anna's exceptional learning aptitude and leadership abilities, he believed that one day her understanding would surpass even his expectations. After a while, Anna put down the components she was working on, walked over to Roland, and slightly bowed her head. Roland was momentarily surprised, wondering if this was her way of accepting the earlier patting. He tentatively patted her soft hair. Turning his attention to Lucia, she reported on her work. The mine had produced a vast array of ores, and she had been working tirelessly to break down the elements. She needed more time to document them. Roland nodded approvingly. He then inquired about the samples from the 12th test. Lucia promptly presented the sample. Observing the element, Roland felt a sense of familiarity. He asked Anna to process the ore into fine metal wire, suspecting that this might be tungsten. Tungsten is an extremely hard metal with a very high melting point. In many applications, it's typically used as tungsten wire, especially in light bulbs. Roland instructed Anna to process the material into extremely fine metal wire, twisting it into a spiral shape and affixing it to a glass frame. This frame was then encased within a glass bulb, thus completing the primary part of the electric lamp. However, for it to emit a stable glow, two more crucial steps were required. These were also the most challenging aspects of creating a light bulb. Firstly, the bulb needed to be evacuated to prevent the tungsten filament from reacting with oxygen, and secondly, it had to be sealed to ensure that air wouldn't penetrate inside. Two witches had the capability to perform these steps. Roland first approached Agatha, using her abilities to fill the bulb with pure nitrogen as an ideal inert gas. Then, Soraya was responsible for sealing it. With that, a rudimentary incandescent lamp was successfully created. That evening, Roland gathered all the members of the town hall in front of the castle, ordering his guards to extinguish the torches in the courtyard. Everyone surrounded him, curious about his intentions. With a clearing of his throat, Roland drew everyone's attention. In the midst of a snowy evening, as the entire courtyard was pitch black, Roland flipped the switch. In an instant, the center of the courtyard was illuminated by a warm orange-yellow glow. At that moment, words were unnecessary. The unwavering stares of everyone and the silent atmosphere said it all. Roland has brought electricity to this world. Roland then declared. From now on, every household in Bordertown will be blessed with this kind of light.